Hello and welcome. My very special guest today is Nami, one of the co-founders of Truecaller. Nami, thank you very much for speaking to NDTV. I wanted to start by asking you, and I'm sure you've been asked this question many, many times. What was the inspiration behind Truecaller?
Well, it started out with trying to solve a problem that me and my co-founder Alan had ourselves. So we were getting calls from across the world. In my case, it was because I was studying, and in my class we were 100 students. Two of us spoke Swedish, since Truecaller is a Swedish company. Two of us spoke Swedish, and the rest came from all across the world. And during the holidays, they would go back to their respective countries, and they would text me from their local SIM. Saying, I'm coming back this date, do you want to hang out before university starts again? And I was thinking to myself, why can't my phone tell me who this person is? And that's basically how it started. So I had a conversation with Alan, my co-founder, and realized that he also had a similar problem, more related to spam. And we as engineers just started building the product for ourselves. Liked it so much, we put it up on a forum for developers. Back in the day, this was 2009, 2010, before the app stores were even invented. And we had 10,000 people downloading the app within the first week. And so we thought, this is not just our problem, this is likely to be a global problem. Let's solve it together. And that's where it started.
What's interesting is that in India, Truecaller is huge. There are a lot of users. You now have a growing market in Africa. But in Europe, and even in Sweden, it's not that well known. Why do you think that is?
I think it has a lot to do with the Android versus iOS split. Mm-hmm. So in Europe, large parts of Europe, especially in the Nordic countries, you see iOS having 50 to 60% of the market share. And the reality is that the app, Truecaller as such, has limited functionality on the iOS platform. So that's one part of it. The other part of it, I think, has to do with the fact that there are all these public directories in Sweden, for instance. So you could go to one of those directories today and just type in my name, my first name, and you'll get my home address, you'll get which cars I own, you'll get my birthday, you'll get a bunch of public information that is just out there, and it's public, and everyone is used to this. Mm-hmm. However, in a market like India, for instance, this information has not been public in the past, and so I think there's a lot of curiosity about who a person is, and people want to find data points that make them relate to a call. And so I think that inspires a lot more word of mouth, and for our part, that would mean growth. Mm-hmm. Those two parts, I think, the fact that the OS split is there, but also the fact that these directories have been around in the Nordic region, at least, for many, many years, whereas in many other countries, they have not.
So you think it's a split between the developed world and the developing world, where possibly information is not that open or public. What's also interesting is that recently Truecaller sort of shifted on to payments, and that was interesting. What has that been like for you, and why the shift?
So in our mind, we were building Truecaller as a communication app. And the purpose of it was to build trust and safety into communication. Going back to your previous question, one of the reasons why we thought it was so important to continue building Truecaller globally and not just focus on the Western markets was that we believe that it brings trust into society, into the fabric of society, to have this information publicly available. You can trust that this person that you employ today is going to be around tomorrow, and that this is that he or she is really who they claim to be. And that was one part of it. But then when you go into transactions, you actually have a very similar problem where you're not sure of whether, in the case of your entering an account number, I bet everyone has been in a position where they've been fearing that they enter one digit wrong and their money is gone, right? So the way we thought about it is that transactions usually happen in post a communication. So even when it's offline, you speak to a store clerk, or when you're speaking to a friend about owing them money, or you're notified that you have a bill pending. In all of those cases, there's been a communication happening, and so it's in a adjacent space. And as a communication app, we have that communication happening on our platform. You should, as a user, be able to complete that transaction without leaving the service. So that's where we started out.
You entered the market, well, in India at least, a little late. So is growth as planned, or do you think, because you've been slow off the bat, it's going to take some time?
We have roughly 20 million Truecaller Pay customers today. And to me, payments is not something that we entered thinking that it's something that we will do fantastic in just like 1, 2, 3 years. To me, seeing how Sweden even moved from a cash society to a cashless society, it took at least 10 years, right? So if you look at India, I think you need to take into perspective that things take time. And having started off being a year and a half into having payments enabled on Truecaller and having 20 million users use it, I think we've had a fantastic start. There's always more that we can do and we aspire to do, but it has been a good start. However, we never intended to be a company, and we have never really been, it's not a part of the DNA of the company to spend money to acquire users in organic growth and kind of do cashbacks and all of these things. We believe in building a fantastic experience, one that people feel that they can trust and that is safe, and that efficiency is part of the core of the experience. And by doing so, we believe that we will win the hearts of the customers, and we continue down that path.
The reason I particularly asked that question, because in India, really, if you say the word Truecaller, everyone knows it. They know it as the app for what it does, but nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, you do have 20 million customers, but not a lot of people, it's know of it as a payment gateway. So my question would really be that even if it's not something that you're paying to acquire customers, are you looking of Truecaller as a payment platform ultimately? Would the priority shift and would that become the main business, or that's still some time to come? How does that work?
The simple answer is no, we don't think of Truecaller as a payment company. We think of Truecaller as a communication company, and that we facilitate and make communication more efficient. Payments is part of that, but on top of that, there's a couple of other services, again in adjacent spaces, where you can bring innovation through the data you have. So if you look at our payment users, for instance, of the 20 million users, about 50% of them, half of them, are actually in tier 2 and 3 cities, and they do not have any other digital payment app installed on their devices. Now, what that tells me is that we have penetration at such a scale in India that we have the opportunity to actually be their first experience of digital payments, and that's a long-term relationship that we want to build with our customers. The second thing is that we're actually enabling a lot of people who have been kind of unbanked, if you will, because they're in these tier 2 and 3 and even 4 cities, and we're enabling financial services for these users, and being their first digital experience in that sense. And it'll take a lot of time for people to get used to getting rid of cash, because holding hard cash in your hand is a very powerful feeling.
You said earlier that one of the core things that you believe that you wanted to provide to the customers was trust, and that's quite a core value for Truecaller. Recently, with the entire WhatsApp hack, where Pegasus was, there were also some reports about some bug with Truecaller in India. Now, with the fact that here's an app that people absolutely trust to give them information as they need it, they're using it for payments. What can you say to tell people, your consumers, that data is safe, your account is safe, or whatever it is, because at the end of the day, they are trusting Truecaller to a large extent?
Well, there's multiple ways of looking at that. The first thing is like how we address it towards our users, the people who trust us with their data. And I think the most important thing there has been that, if you look at the history of Truecaller, what we have really tried to build is a product and a brand that stands for trust, and where we earn people's trust. And the way their data has been utilized has always been in a transparent way. Now, when it comes to data localization, for instance, which is also a very important question for a lot of people, Truecaller was proactive when we launched Truecaller Pay and localized all the data in India from the start. So we were, we followed the regulations even before they were set. And the same goes with a lot of the other data privacy and regulation stipulations that are coming. For instance, we have all the data of all our Indian users in India, regardless of if it's payments data or any other data. And, they're secured with bank grade security on our systems. The other part of that I want to use this time to address, your question, is the awareness of the consumer, which has increased, and I think that's the right thing, and we need to participate in increasing the awareness of our consumers. In general, people should know that they need to have a device that is secure and where they get the latest updates, the security patches, the security updates, not only for the device, but also that they keep their apps updated. And I think that's equally important. So if the company keeps fixing things that could be potential issues in the future, whether it's us or it's WhatsApp or it's someone else, in the future, there's going to be perpetrators that are going to utilize the vulnerabilities that you have in an old client build. So when you're running an old version of the app, then they're going to utilize that known factor.
I just wanted to understand how much would for instance, Truecaller willingly share data with governments if is it on a need-to-know basis? I just wanted to get that sense of, there is data that people won't want to go out. So how does that work for Truecaller?
We generally do not give out information to governments. The areas where we have collaborated has been around terrorism. And I think that's in the public interest for everyone, and we want to stand behind that. As a brand, we do stand behind that, and we do believe that that's when there's those kind of cases, it's important that you as a member of society, but also a company like Truecaller, if it is able to contribute to that, that we do that. When it comes to other types of data requests, we don't have much or anything that I'm aware of. And I think the main reason for that is that Truecaller, going back to your first question and talking about directory services as public directories and kind of having that information available, if you can use the app Truecaller to look up a certain phone number, and you have the phone number, you don't get it from us, you have the phone number, then you will get a certain level of details, like a name of a person. Now, if the government would want to use that, they would use that equally as a user. There's no additional data that we're holding, that we're not sharing with the community, because at the end of the day, Truecaller is a community-based service, and it's built by the community to be utilized by the community.
The Indian economy has massively slowed down. The global economy is showing signs of slowing down. Does that worry you for your app? Are there questions, and what do you plan to in terms of growth?
In terms of growth, there has been no slowdown for us so far. Financially, we have every year has been doing a lot better than the previous year. So I'm not concerned about that part. However, I do think that to build this inclusive, for instance, digital, payments in India, to get people included in that, you do need to have a smartphone, and you do need to have data connectivity, and you do need to have a lot of different things. And so if people's ability to acquire those things, obviously that slows down growth from that kind of macro level economy, which is concerning, but it has not been something that we've seen it in the past.
So clearly Truecaller is currently prepared for it, in terms of...
Absolutely.
Yeah. My last question, again, globally, even in Europe, there is so much talk of not borders shutting down, but government speaking about stopping immigrants, and it's a bit crazy because we're a global world, but Truecaller is a very inclusive company. You have people, it's a multinational company. Is that a very conscious effort, or is that just something that the business requires? I'm
glad you brought it up, actually, because it's a topic that is very dear to my heart. Being an immigrant myself in Sweden, it's an area where I think a lot of companies can do a lot better, we've always had in our conscience that we should strive to build a global company, to recruit the best people does not mean to recruit the best people from the local university here. It means recruit the best people wherever in the world they are.
Nami, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.